lecture first.
On management, regarding, for example, the restaurant and cooking and managing the guest house, some of the policies were a little, I found them to be a little strange, but then later on I could understand. For example, in Vrindavan, Prabhupada wanted 3 separate kitchens, small little kitchens with a little oven, one of those mud-caked ovens, or, that's what we were using, wood and coal. So he said, these 3, he said, he told me that I don't want our life members to go outside to drink their tea. Let them brew their tea here if they want, on their own. So you provide them. So we provided 3 small cubicles where they could actually make their tea and things like that. So initially, you would think that tea is an intoxicant and devotees are not supposed to take. And here is Prabhupada providing tea for the guests and life members. And he told, and so I asked Prabhupada, I said, okay Prabhupada, sometimes devotees are very fanatic and they are saying, how can you do that? Because I don't want to mention names because it's not necessary. So then he said, yes. When a guest comes to the house, then you try to fulfill all his wishes as long as it doesn't really involve sinful activities. So we may not drink it because it is a part of sadhana, but drinking tea is not a sinful activity. It may be in a mode of ignorance, but it's certainly not a sinful activity. So there's no harm if you provide tea for the guests, And he gave me some wonderful instructions, and which naturally I treasure very much, and I try to follow it as much as I can. Regarding translation, he told me there are 2 ways of translating. One is a literal translation, literal, word, and the other is bhavartha. I mean, he expressed that particular word in English, in Sanskrit or Bengali. And he told me, capture the spirit, because these are very deep spiritual and devotional writings which convey the spiritual devotional mood of the authors because of all acharyas. So he said, I personally prefer this bhavartha, to translate the spirit and mood of their writings rather than the literal translation. He said, you read it, read the original, Bengali, or Sanskrit or whatever, Hindi, understand it, and then formulate it in your own words. He insisted, in your own words, you formulate it and write it. And I think on one occasion, Satsvarup Maharaj was there, and he told Satsvarup Maharaj that you should edit this book. This is a very important book, and it truly is. BBT did print that. It's now it's entitled Renunciation Through Wisdom, and it's an incredible book. It's a gradual, unfolding of the philosophy and purport of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada just excelled himself in the sense that the writing, the original Bengali, was very scholarly. When he wrote in English, he tried, I think, to do it in a very simple manner. But in his Bengali writing, I think he purposely wanted to be very scholarly and erudite presentation. So the translation was quite a challenging, proposition, and so he would ask me to come every single day. This was in Vrindavan. While he was in Vrindavan, to read to him, he would have the Bengali, and I would have to read the English translation that I had done, and he liked it, I must say, and that made me very happy. It made me very blissful. Like one time I was in Calcutta Temple in '76, and the Arati had just ended, and I was supposed to go and call Srila Prabhupada from his room and for the lecture, evening lecture. And the building, this where we have the temple, right, still now we have it till today, had this Venetian blinds, the little slats, the wooden slats. So if you just slightly kind of pulled at it, you could see through it. So before entering, I kind of peeped in, and the Nishinga prayers were going on, and there was Prabhupada sitting with his back to me. He had these small little garlands of the small Radha Govindaji, they call Radha Govindaji, and he had them around his ears, and he was swaying his head and swinging them, and the garlands were also swinging, and he probably I don't know what it was, he was totally absorbed in his transcendental world. But he immediately said, "Yes, please come in." I mean, and I don't think I really made any noise, So, that's Srila Prabhupada, I mean, you could go on. It's just incredible that he was here and he was at the same time totally absorbed in Krishna. So this was 77, March, April, after the Gaur Purnima festival, Prabhupada comes to Bombay. And we all heard that Srila Prabhupada was not very well. So we was, at that time the Bombay temple of course had opened, and work was still going on in the Twin Towers, what is now the guest house, and Prabhupada's quarters were there in one of the towers, in fact the right-hand tower. And so we all went in front of the gate to greet Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada's car came, and I just took the opportunity and hopped in to the front. There was the one little place there, and Srila Prabhupada was there, and Gopal Krishna Maharaj, and Surabhi Maharaj. He was the architect, and I think Harisauri Prabhu was also there. So I was sitting in the front, but I kept looking back, and Srila Prabhupada just sat there. He was already a little, his features were a little drawn, he was unwell. And so when we were passing the Twin Towers, Prabhupada just looked to the right, and he saw it pass and didn't say anything, and then again looked straight forward. Then we came and stopped in front of his old quarters. It was in one of these two-storied buildings where the BBT was housed at that time. And as soon as the car came to a stop, we all hopped out, opened the dicky, took out his luggage, and Prabhupada just sat in the car where he was. And there was a flurry of activities, taking everything up. And so when all Prabhupada's luggage and everything was taken up, Surabhi, or one of the devotees, I don't remember who it was, informed Prabhupada, all your luggage is already upstairs, you may come. So he said, this is not my place. This is not my house. My quarters are there in the Twin Tower. Why did you bring me here? So it was a little embarrassing for Sarvabhavana Maharaj because his quarters were not complete. So he came hedging and hawing and, wringing his hands, Prabhupada, this, that. And said, no, I'm not going here. You promised me that this is going to be my quarters, take me there. And he remained seated. Didn't raise his voice, didn't do anything, very calmly everything. So again, everybody went up, brought the things down, turned the car around, stopped in front of the guest house. And in those days, the elevator couldn't reach to the ground level. That section wasn't complete. But we had a palanquin, So immediately a palanquin was brought, and there were two of us who carried Prabhupada to the first floor. And the elevator was already working from there. Prabhupada's quarters were, I think, on the fourth floor or the fifth floor, one of them. So we all went up, and when we entered, everybody, of course, the quarters otherwise was finished. The marble floor needed to be polished, and there was muck everywhere, and the windows were not in place. And at that height, the sea, which is just about 50 meters or so away, it was a strong sea breeze blowing, and we got a chair for Prabhupada and sat down, and the Guru Puja and washing the feet, lotus feet, was done there, and the Guru Puja. So Sarvabhi Maharaj took it upon himself to offer Guru Puja. Now he wanted to somehow or the other, kind of rectify or make amends for what he had thought he had, But my goodness, that day the luck wasn't with him because he couldn't light the lamp. It kept blowing out. And he was fumbling, and anyhow, in the meanwhile he had given orders to clear up the space on the other side. Finally he was able to, complete the Guru Puja, and by that time Prabhupada's reception area, he had already cleaned up, laid out a little carpet and a small table and a sitting asana for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada quietly came and sat there. And I think about most of the devotees were asked to leave, and I think about 10 of us were left. One of the senior devotees like Gopal Krishna Maharaj and Surabhi Maharaj, Giriraj Maharaj was there and all. At that time he was brahmachari, and some other devotees were there, and we sat down, and we all knew that we should expect a thunderstorm because, it was such a mess, and, sound, and the windows were not there. It was incomplete. So we all sat there, everyone hanging their head down, and Prabhupada was sitting there. Prabhupada was also hanging his head down. And I think it must have been several minutes, but it was drawn out. The time, had lost its, meaning. It's a pin of silence. We were all expecting something. So finally Prabhupada raised his head, and he began to speak in a very soft voice, actually tender. Not only that the volume of his voice was toned down, but it was so much. He said, all of you, he said, that you're trying so hard to please this old man who gets irritated so fast. I'm old, and on top of that I am unwell, so little things irritate me. But all of you are so tolerant, For about 10 minutes, he just went on like this. And I tell you, I thought I was the only one who was crying. But when I looked around, everyone had tears in their eyes, including Prabhupada, And it was so sweet, it was so wonderful, How can you, not love a person like this? It's one of the most beautiful experiences I had.
So as we know that Prabhuji brought His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj in ISKCON. So I got one more lecture where he shares about the memories with His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj.
So I want to skip these parts where we were undertaking this journey on road as young graduates. We were young graduates, just passed out of the college. And we wanted to see the world before we kind of settled down for anything. In those days, traveling across from the West to India was very much popular, had become very popular for various reasons. India became a focal point for a spiritual search for those people who were looking for some kind of spirituality. However, the reverse, that is, young boys going from India to the West, was not very common. It was rather uncommon. But we had somehow or the other the material facility to undertake this adventurous journey, shall we say. After a very interesting, constantly changing fortunes on the way, we finally arrived in Germany. It was already October and it's very cold. On the way, we had lost a lot of weight and therefore we needed to recuperate and get back our strength. So in those days, Germany was allowing Indians to come in without previously having a visa. We just got the visa at the border. Stayed on. I enrolled in the university, Maharaja also. However, Maharaja's mind was not very happy in Germany. So, as he put it, the search for a spiritual master. And he was very serious about it. So he left, went back to India, and I'm sure all of you are quite aware from his own writing, his hagiographical account of his life. Whereas I stayed back and I joined the university and I began to study in Germany. And that is what my parents actually wanted of me, so and therefore I didn't want to disappoint them. When my father had passed away, so it was just my mother. So I didn't want to disappoint my mother. So I continued to study, but my mind and heart was not in the studies, although the studies itself was very interesting. Comparative philosophy, visual communication, those were my subjects in the university in Hamburg. But when Maharaj was there in 1971,
we arrived in Germany in end of 68. I'm not going to maintain any chronological order in my accounting, as I recount what actually happened. So in 68, end of 68, we arrived in Germany. I was at 69. I'm not very sure anymore. And we stayed on. He went back. I continued to study in the university. And in 71, we had met the devotees on the street in Hamburg. And we were quite curious to see German boys and girls rather oddly dressed. They were wearing dhotis, but they were also wearing thick shoes. So it was a little incongruous. However, the chanting was very attractive, the chanting Hare Krishna on the streets. So you can imagine our surprise as early as 69 to meet the devotees on the street chanting Harinam. So we immediately approached them and they invited us for their Sunday feast. They were just learning how to cook. So what they cooked was a disaster. However, because it was prasad, we gratefully accepted. Anyhow, that was our first encounter with the devotees of Srila Prabhupada. Then later, I took up contact. And I actually I had completed my theoretical part of my master's degree, but you had to put in 2 years of practicals. That's the system here in Germany, or was. But exactly at this time, I met the devotees, and what completely changed my whole view of life and the way I was living was a book from Srila Prabhupada called Chaitanya in 5 Features. I'm just giving a little background on myself, so at least I'm not completely alien to my audience. I haven't read the book that Maharaj wrote, this Ocean of Mercy, but he told me that he had mentioned me there. I don't know to what extent and how much. So I just kind of fleet over and give you a little historical background, biographical background of myself. So when I read that book, Chaitanya in 5 Features, is the 5 chapters of Adi Leela that Srila Prabhupada brought out in a book form, because somehow or the other Prabhupada was in the impression that he might have to leave any time. So before he could complete the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is a voluminous work, he brought this out, Chaitanya in 5 Features, which dealt with in depth and profoundly with the essence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. I don't know if that book is still available, but it's a part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and there might not Bhaktivedanta book just might not have reprinted that. After having read that book, I was convinced I'm wasting my life. So I wrote to the authorities. That time the temple was located in somewhere near Frankfurt. It was a small chain of hills. Can't call them mountains because they're not very high. It's called Taunus. So the devotees had rented a castle with 65 rooms. And that was the temple of Sri Sri Radha Madhava. But there was the refused Srila Prabhupada a visa. The devotees were becoming very popular, and the German authorities became a little alarmed on the gaining popularity of ISKCON. And of course, some of the leading devotees did make some very provocative statements. Probably it was unnecessary to make such provocative statements against the government. Anyhow, they did so, and that brought the wrath of the German government on the society, and quite a few things happened, very unpleasant things, which I don't want to go into. However, the worst thing that happened was that they refused Srila Prabhupada the visa to enter Germany. Now we were all waiting there. I was already married at that time, and my son was also there. We had all joined. Both my wife and myself, we were waiting to get initiated. But as I said, Srila Prabhupada was refused an entry visa. So that was very disheartening for me. However, this probably gave me the impetus
Hare Krishna. So it was amazing to hear from Prabhu. And as he told that he didn't exactly know what Guru Maharaj had wrote in Ocean of Mercy. So in the later part of the introduction, we'll be hearing from Ocean of Mercy as well. So I would first screen share introduction of Prabhu, and then we'll go back to. So about Sarvabhavana Prabhu, I'm just going through the presentation which I made, and so Prabhuji was initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he got initiation in the very early days of ISKCON. And in the very early days, he was one of the Indians who joined ISKCON movement. And he was known for his dedication to temporal development, leadership, and preaching in various parts of the world. And he also served in numerous managerial and spiritual roles and maintaining high devotional standards throughout the temples like ISKCON Vrindavan and other temples. About his early days in ISKCON. So he joined ISKCON in the 1970s and received direct guidance from Srila Prabhupada, deeply influenced by Prabhupada's vision of preaching, book distribution, and temple worship. Committed to learning and sharing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness with sincerity. So we can see that most of the Prabhupada disciples we have been hearing from, like this lecture has been going on from December. This was a very unique quality which each of Srila Prabhupada disciple had, that they were influenced by Srila Prabhupada's vision of anything. Either it can be preaching or book distribution or temple worship or kirtan or prasadam. But they were so deeply influenced that it remained a lifelong mark in their hearts, and thus they dedicated their whole lives towards this mission. So again, repeating the same pattern, even Prabhuji was deeply influenced by Prabhupada's vision. About temple and leadership services, he served as temple president and administrator in various ISKCON centers, instrumental in developing and maintaining communities of devotees with care and discipline. Known for his ability to organize large festivals, manage temples, and train new devotees. So earlier, in the 70s, there were very less devotees. So initially, um, there was one pastime I heard about, that one devotee joined an ISKCON. It's not linked to this, but it's connecting pastime about this. One devotee joined ISKCON. He was 25 years old, young boy. He joined ISKCON and he was sent to the temple. He was dedicated. He was sent to a temple that you have to serve in this temple. So he went there, and when he reached there, he realized that he was the most senior person by age. 25 years old was the most senior person in his age. And the temple president was 19 years old. And the devotees were somewhere around 17, 16, 17, 18. And similarly, in the same case, when Prabhuji joined in 1970s, there were not many temples in the world. And if there were temples, they had devotees had to do the services like temple presidents and everything. It was just a title of being a temple president, but the temple president would do everything from deity worship to cooking prasadam to distributing prasadam to book distribution to everything. So this point was mentioned somewhere in the lecture, which we couldn't play. So I'm just sharing that in this glorification. Preaching and training. His relationship with Prabhupada, as we heard about how he had deep relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Apart from this, he was also personally connected to Srila Prabhupada because he was Indian. So, Indian touch hits different. So, as we know that even Bhakti Swami Guru Maharaj had a deep affection towards Srila Prabhupada, and even Srila Prabhupada had deep affection towards Guru Maharaj because they were both Bengalis. So, even Tamal Krishna Maharaj used to say that sometimes when these two people, these two personalities, Bhakti Swami Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada used to talk, it would be something like a jealousy amongst the Western devotees because they couldn't understand anything, what they are talking, what deep topic it's going on, and Guru Maharaj would just do the service and get back to Srila Prabhupada. So even with Sarvabhavana Prabhu, this was the same case, and he had a deep relationship with Srila Prabhupada. He encourages devotees to remain faithful to the foundational mission and principles laid by Srila Prabhupada. Shares personal memories and realizations that inspire new devotees. Maintains a deep and personal connection with Prabhupada's teachings, as we heard how emphatic he was about Srila Prabhupada and the mission. Encourages devotees to remain faithful to the foundational mission and principles laid by Srila Prabhupada. Salted Bread, a powerful memoir. So this book, if you don't know about this book, it was uh, how ISKCON started preaching in Russia, and it had to undergo so many challenges. Devotees were sent to various um, various it was not just about a jail, but it was most of a torturing center. They had to go through many things together. So that whole scenario was written down in a book called Salted Bread. So this Salted Bread was co-authored by Sarvabhavana Prabhu and Mahanidhi Swami Maharaj, and it documents the persecution, imprisonment, and faith of Russian devotees who practiced Krishna consciousness despite several operations. This is one of a very popular book, and it has a very famous drama as well called as Salted Bread. You can see that on YouTube. So it is all about how preaching started in USSR and Russian communities. He played a vital role in ISKCON's growth in former Soviet Union, especially during the underground years. Yes, these years were called as underground years because preaching was not allowed. If devotees were caught open-handedly in the public doing preaching programs, they were imprisoned, they were tortured, and some also had left their lives. Just a short uh, glimpse about salted bread. So there was some set of devotees who were in prison, and they had nothing, like obviously no mobile, no beads, nothing was allowed inside. So the jail keepers used to give them bread to eat. So these devotees were so dedicated that they used to soak that bread in water and used to make beads out of it. And they made 108 beads japamala, and on that salted bread bead they used to chant. So that's how the name came, Salted Bread, about this book. So you can see the drama or you can read that book. He acted as a bridge between eastern and western wings of ISKCON, bringing awareness and support to Russian devotees. Known for preserving the history and sacrifices of early Soviet devotees through personal testimony and documentation. Legacy and ongoing service. His Grace Sarvabhavana Prabhu stands as a symbol of courage, conviction, and compassion. His life reflects the power of Guru Nishtha and dedication to spreading Krishna consciousness against all odds. Respected for his humility, discipline, and clarity of instruction. I'm just going through and reading through because I wanted to share something from Ocean of Mercy, which was directly authored by His Holiness Bhakti Swami Guru Maharaj. About there are anecdotes about Sarvabhavana Prabhu. So I wanted to read that. Remembering Srila Prabhupada, that's one anecdote. Once in the Calcutta temple in 76, the evening aarti had just ended, and I was supposed to call Srila Prabhupada from his room so that he could come and give the lecture. Before I entered his room, which was near the temple room. If you might have visited to ISKCON Kolkata, just next to the temple hall, you have to walk towards the left, and there's a small room which was inside the temple hall, kind of. That was Srila Prabhupada's room, and it's the same one till date. Before I entered his room, which was near the temple room, I slightly pulled his Venetian blinds and peeked in. Prabhupada was sitting with his back to me. The little garlands from small Radha Govindji, the deities worshipped in the Calcutta temple, were around his ears. Because, big garland, the small garlands, you can't wear that. It's very small. And Radha Govind, the deities in ISKCON Kolkata, are very small, tiny deities. So that garland was around his ear. Devotees in the temple room were singing the Narsimha prayers. Prabhupada was saying his head in time, and those garlands were also swinging. He was totally absorbed in his transcendental world, but although I don't think I made any noise, he immediately said, "Yes, please come in." That's Srila Prabhupada. It's incredible that he was there, and at the same time, he was totally absorbed in Krishna. So we can see from the eyes of a devotee, from the realization of a devotee, how he saw Srila Prabhupada in the kirtan as well as attending all the devotees. So I just wanted to go through Ocean of Mercy, in which chapter 3, Guru Maharaj describes how he met ISKCON devotees through the eyes of Sarvabhavana Prabhu. So, Ocean of Mercy, chapter 3, the nectar of devotion. I'm just going through the anecdotes which were written. So, just giving a preface to this, before this chapter 3, Guru Maharaj describes how he had traveled how he had traveled in the search of Guru. He was searching for Guru. He had went to Anandmayi Mata's ashram, and he also went to Swarupanand Swami, who was a disciple of Anandmayi Mata, and various other spiritual masters across India, across Himalayas. And at the end of the day, he also met Siddhananda Swami, and he didn't get that affection that he wanted to have from his spiritual master. Now he was thinking about the fact that if a spiritual master really wants, he will come out of the way to find me out. So, yes, let's get back to the anecdote. Written by His Holiness Bhakti Swami Guru Maharaj. This period in Calcutta was among the most difficult of my life. I could neither adjust to the world around me nor step into the spiritual life for which I yearned. I knew that to follow the spiritual path, I needed a guru, someone who would take me by my hand and lead me onto the spiritual path, to a world of knowledge, emancipation, and joy. But I had not been able to find him. And now I was waiting. The incident with Anandmayi Ma had given me hope. If I had a guru, I felt he would reveal himself to me. Like spiritual master would come by himself. So now comes the anecdote of His Grace Sarvabhavana Prabhu. One evening, I received a visit from my old friend Prashun. So Prabhuji's old name, non-initiated name was Prashun. I was happy to see him, but he looked different. The Prashun I remembered had long hair and dressed in Western clothes, but now his head was shaven and he wore a dhoti and kurta. I knew that in Germany he had become a devotee of Krishna in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So his change of appearance did shock me, but the glow from his face was striking. His whole demeanor radiated peace and tranquility. So about the glow, before joining ISKCON and after joining ISKCON, it's clearly mentioned by Guru Maharaj how after and before effects were there. When I had first heard of that Prasoon and his German girlfriend Cornelia had joined ISKCON, I had not taken it seriously, since he and I had not had a very pleasant experience when he had visited the ISKCON temple in Hamburg. So prior to having a search about, prior to having search in the Himalayas about Guru Maharaj had gone to ISKCON temples when he was in Germany with Prasoon, with Sarvabhavana Prabhu. But now this anecdote where he comes again to take him to temple got him to ISKCON. As I had been coming out of the university canteen one day, I had seen a group of young Westerners, the women dressed in saris and the men in dhotis and kurtas. The sight had delighted me, but it had also made me long for home. I was far from Calcutta, and these young men and women dressed in traditional Indian attire had filled me with pride for my culture. One of them was giving out magazines, and I walked up to him and bought one, and we talked. He told me about their mission and invited me to the temple, just a subway stop from the university. I had visited and befriended some of them, and when I had shared my experience with Prasoon, he and I visited the temple together a few times. Once we were talking to one of the American devotees there, and because we were doing most of the talking, another devotee who may not have liked that we were talking more than listening started to criticize us, saying that Buddha was a swindler and Ramakrishna, a popular spiritual personage from Bengal, was a cheat. Prasoon had looked at me with a surprise. Neither he nor I had mentioned Buddha or Ramakrishna. And I had silently indicated that we should leave, which we did, and we never had returned. Since then, whenever I had seen the devotees, I had avoided them. If I saw them on one side of the road, I would move to the other. And when I had returned to Calcutta, even though this Iskorn temple was not far from my house, and I had passed it many times, I had never entered. So when I heard Prasoon had joined, so these all pastimes are on the previous journey when Guru Maharaj visited Germany. So this incident now starts. The present day begins now. So when I heard that Prasoon had joined ISKCON, I did not think that he was serious. Seeing how he looked when he came to me, however, how effulgent he was, I had to revise my impression. Are you really serious about your involvement? I asked him. He answered with a gentle smile. Yes. He told me how he had joined ISKCON in Berlin after reading a book, Sri Ishopanishad, by its founder Acharya, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He had been initiated and received a spiritual name, Sarvabhavana Das Adhikari. Now he had returned to help the Krishna consciousness movement in India and was serving as a vice president of the temple in New Delhi. He invited me to go to Delhi, but I remained non-committal. He did not try to persuade me or preach to me. We just spoke and enjoy each other's association. Guru Maharaj says, I was impressed with the life Sarva Bhavana was leading, abstaining from meat eating, intoxication, sex, and gambling. But what impressed me most was his love and respect for his Guru. So you can imagine that level of love and respect and dedication he had for Srila Prabhupada, that Guru Maharaj was par at its standards. And he's saying that in his book that he was so impressive that Guru Maharaj was inspired by him, inspired and impressed from him. When Sarvabhavana spoke about him, his eyes lit up and his face radiated joy. I thought his attachment might be merely sentimental, but I was impressed nonetheless. The next morning, Sarvabhavana and I got together again. But when I offered to take him to lunch, he declined. I assured him that the food would be vegetarian, but he said he would go home and eat there. When I insisted, he told me that although the food would be vegetarian, the kitchen and the utensils would have been used to cook other preparations. Again, I was impressed with his standards and conviction. I had many friends who were strict vegetarians, but Sarvabhavana standards were on another level. That afternoon, I accompanied him to the nearby ISKCON temple where he introduced me to a group of young American devotees. So this pastime goes on and on. So this was how Prabhuji re-invited Guru Maharaj to ISKCON, and then later in the part, just few paragraphs away, it's written how Guru Maharaj got the book Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. So it was an amazing experience that how such like even Sarvabhavana Prabhu gave many lectures to the devotees, to the disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Swami Guru Maharaj post Guru Maharaj's disappearance. So it was a kind of same fatherly love which we all devotees got from him. It was somewhere around 2020 where he gave a series of lecture about his memories with Guru Maharaj and his experiences and everything. So we are grateful that we have such amazing spiritual fathers and grandfathers for some of us to be associating till now with us. So as instructed by His Holiness Bhakti Prema Swami Maharaj that we are having this session of Srila Prabhupada disciple glorification just so that we can know more about Srila Prabhupada disciples. Like we know that our spiritual masters were Prabhupada Gata Pran. They were Prabhupada was life and soul for all these Srila Prabhupada disciples. We can see in the glorification everything we can see. They were impressed by Srila Prabhupada, how deep-heartedly they were dependent on Srila Prabhupada for their spiritual life. So these Srila Prabhupada disciples are not very much known to this generation of devotees. So this session has been organized just so that we can know more and more about Srila Prabhupada disciples, and it was amazing to share glories of His Grace Sarvabhavana Prabhu. Jai His Grace Sarvabhavana Prabhu ki Jai. Param Pujyapad Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj ki Jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.